Hi, friends. I'm Max Lucado, and welcome to Fresh Hope. I'm so glad you joined me, because over the next 6 episodes, we're going to talk about one of the most universal experiences, fear. Have you felt it? Me too. Well, this series is based on my book, Fearless. You know, the world hasn't given us fewer reasons to fear, has it? Well, no matter how scary the world becomes, the source of our hope and courage remains the same. You would have liked my brother. Everyone did. His handshake was big and eager. His laughter was contagious. Dee never met a stranger. But in his mid-teen years, he made one acquaintance he should have avoided. A bootlegger who sold beer to underage drinkers. Alcohol made a play for us both. It entwined me, but it enchained him. And over the next 4 decades, my brother drank away health, relationships, jobs, and money. But at the age of 54, he discovered an aquifer of willpower and enjoyed a season of sobriety. He emptied his bottles, stabilized his marriage, reached out to his children, attended AA, but the hard living had taken its toll. On a January night several years ago, he told Donna, his wife, that he couldn't breathe well. And by 4 a.m., he was having chest pains. Donna called 911. The rescue team loaded Dee onto the gurney. He waved weakly, smiled bravely, and told Donna not to worry. But by the time she and one of Dee's sons reached the hospital, he was gone. The physician invited them into the room where Dee's body lay, along with his final message. His hand was resting on the top of his thigh, with the 2 center fingers folded and the thumb extended, the universal sign language symbol for I love you. I've tried to envision my brother's final moments, struggling for each breath. At some point, he realized only a few remained. Yet rather than panic, he found some courage. Perhaps you could use some. You may not be down to your final heartbeat, but you may be down to your last paycheck, solution, or thimble of faith. Each sunrise brings fresh reasons for fear. Layoffs, the economy, war, turnovers, downturns, pandemics. Terrorism begins with the word terror. We fear being sued, finishing last, going broke. We sophisticate investment plans, create elaborate security systems, and legislate stronger military. Yet we depend upon mood-altering drugs more than any other generation in history. Fear has taken a 100-year lease on the building next door, unwilling to share the space with happiness. Do you ever see the two together? Can one be happy and afraid at the same time? Clear thinking and afraid? Confident and afraid? No. Fear herds us into a prison and slams the doors. Wouldn't it be great to walk out? Imagine your life without fear. One day, just one day, absent the dread of failure, rejection, and calamity. This is the possibility behind Jesus' question in Matthew 8:26. Why are you afraid? At first we wonder if Jesus is serious. He may be kidding, kind of like one swimmer asking another, now why are you wet? But Jesus doesn't smile, and nor do the men in the boat to whom he asks the question. Here is how Matthew records his version of the story in chapter 8, verses 23 and 24. Jesus got into a boat, and his followers went with him. A great storm arose on the lake, so that waves covered the boat. The Greek word Matthew used for storm was seismos, a quake, a trembling eruption of sea and sky. He used the word on only 2 other occasions, at Jesus' death when Calvary shook, and at Jesus' resurrection when the graveyard trembled. Here, Jesus silenced the sea of fear, sudden fear. Do you sense Matthew's surprise in the way he links his 2 sentences? Jesus got into a boat and his followers went with him. A great storm arose on the lake. Wouldn't you hope for a happier consequence of obedience? Jesus got into a boat, his followers went with him, and suddenly a great rainbow arched in the sky. A flock of doves appeared. But the story sends the not so subtle and not too popular reminder: getting on board with Christ can mean getting soaked with Christ. It's not the absence of storms that sets Christians apart. It's whom we discover in the storm, an unstirred Christ. Matthew 8:24 says, Jesus was sleeping. Now there's a scene. The disciples scream and Jesus dreams. Thunder roars and Jesus snores. Could you sleep at a time like this? Could you snooze during a roller coaster ride? Mark's gospel adds 2 curious details in chapter 4 and verse 38. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. In the stern on a pillow. Jesus didn't doze off while sitting up on the deck. This was an intentional nap. He had gone down below, knowing a storm was afoot. Well, his snooze troubles the disciples. Matthew and Mark record their responses as 3 staccato Greek pronouncements in one question. In Matthew 8:25, they yell, "Lord, save, dying." In Mark 4:38, they ask, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" They do not ask about Jesus' strength. Can you still the storm? His knowledge. Are you aware of the storm or his know-how? Do you have any experience with storms? But rather they raise doubts about Jesus' character. Do you not care? Fear does this. It corrodes our confidence in God's goodness, and we begin to wonder if he cares. And fear turns us into control freaks. Do something about the storm is the implied demand of the question. You see, fear at its center is a perceived loss of control. When life spins out, we grab for something we can manage. Our diet, the tidiness of a house, the armrest of a plane, or in many cases, people. The more insecure we feel, the meaner we become. Martin Niemöller was a German pastor who took a heroic stand against Adolf Hitler. When he first met the dictator in 1933, Niemöller stood at the back of the room and listened. His wife later asked him what he learned. He said, "I discovered that Hitler is a terribly frightened man." Fear releases the tyrant within. It also causes spiritual amnesia. Fear makes us forget what Jesus has done. The disciples had seen Jesus heal and cast out demons, yet they questioned him in the storm. And fear sucks life out of our souls. When fear shapes our lives, safety becomes our God. Can the safety lover do anything great? Can the risk-averse accomplish noble deeds for God or others? No. No wonder Jesus wages such a war against fear. His most common command is a variation of fear not. The Gospels list some 125 Christ-issued imperatives. Of these, 21 urge us to not be afraid. The second most common command, to love God and neighbor, appears on only 8 occasions. Let's revisit a few instances of Jesus' most popular command. In Matthew 10:31, so don't be afraid, you are worth much more than many sparrows. Luke 12:32, do not fear, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. John 14 in verse 1, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. Jesus doesn't want you to live in a state of fear, nor do you. You've probably never said, oh, my phobias put such a spring in my step, or I'd be a rotten parent if not for my hypochondria, or my doctor says if I don't begin fretting, I will lose my health. We've learned the high cost of fear. So Jesus' question is a good one. He lifts his head from the pillow, steps out into the storm, and asks, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Now, to be clear, fear serves a function. Fear can keep a child from running across a busy road or an adult from smoking a pack of cigarettes. Fear itself is not a sin, but it can lead to sin. If we medicate fear with angry outbursts, binges, withdrawals, self-starvation, or vice-like control, we exclude God from the solution and make the problem worse. Fear may fill our world, but it doesn't have to fill our hearts. The promise of Christ is simple. We can fear less tomorrow than we do today. When I was 6 years old, my dad let me stay up with the rest of the family and watch the movie The Wolf Man. Boy, did he live to regret that decision. The film left me convinced that the Wolf Man spent each night prowling our den, the room I needed to cross to get to the kitchen for my nightly glass of milk. More than once, I retreated to my father's bedroom and woke him up. Like Jesus in the boat, Dad was sound asleep in the storm. How can he sleep at a time like this, I thought. Opening a sleepy eye, he'd ask, why are you afraid? And I would remind him of the monster. Oh yes, the wolf man, he'd grumble. And he would climb out of bed, escort me through the valley of the shadow of death, and I would look at him with awe and wonder, what kind of man is this? Might it be that God views our seismos storms the way my father viewed the wolf man? Matthew 8 concludes the peril of our story. Jesus got up and gave a command to the wind and the waves, and it became completely calm. He handles the great quaking with a great calming. And the disciples are left wondering in verse 27, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. What kind of man indeed? silencing waves with one word, and equipping a dying man with sufficient courage to send a final message of love to his family. My brother faced his share of seismos moments in life, but in the end, he didn't go under. With Christ, we won't either. I hope you'll join us again, my friend, as we learn how to become fearless. Until next time, remember, with Jesus, you can fear less tomorrow than you do today.